Okay, we're live. Welcome to one and all. Okay, 20b3, bottom left-hand corner. Regarding making a mark on one's flesh in memory of those who have passed. The fourth and final prohibition listed in the Mishnah. And Mesaret Sfirta Achas. Can you find that mark? One who makes a single cut. Okay. Tana Rabbanon, a rabbi's taught us in a brisa. Torah says, V'seret, and a cut. If you look at footnote 31, he quotes the entire verse. He says, V'seret l'nefesh lo yisitnu b'vsarchem, and a cut for a soul, and in brackets he adds in for a departed soul, that's the word nefesh. That means someone who's passed away. You shall not put in your flesh. Why? Because it was a way of the pagans to injure themselves as part of a mourning process. And perhaps similar in a way, I would say, we're gonna get onto tattoos soon, because that's also part of the Mishnah. But I would say it's a similar concept to a tattoo. Someone who tattoos themselves in memory of a loved one. So they would injure themselves. They would cut themselves in memory of a loved one. I guess it's slightly different. I mean, a tattoo is more of a longer lasting memory. Yeah, but I'm talking about this concept of mourning those. The difference is that a tattoo is a long lasting memory of a loved one. So they dedicate something, either a picture or a number or a message that relates to someone who passed away. And often it's therapeutic. Often it fills a void. For example, Kaddish. For others, a tattoo will fill that void. In this case, it sounds like it's more temporary. It's more a sign of grieving, cutting. Oh yeah, keep on reappearing. It's true. It's true. Or maybe we can even compare it. Maybe even compare it for a moment, just as another thought, to Kriya. Right? What does Kriya do? Kriya is there to create a sense of grieving. God forbid, we should know of such things. When a person tears a shirt over one's heart, especially over one's body, that tear, I once mentioned this to you, is that it's a novel concept that we're able to damage a shirt or damage a jacket, we don't normally damage clothing, Baal Tashchit, yeah. And yet Torah tells you, Halacha tells you to tear something that's usable. So what happened to the halacha of Baal Tashchit? And the answer is it's not Baal Tashchit, because they're actually using this vessel, this shirt, to increase grieving. And the moment you do an action to increase grieving, because without that action, it's more of a passive. It's a passive sense of mourning. We want it to be. Judaism is an active type of religion. So, that, and also the tear itself is already emotional. And then you keep on reminding yourself of that tear. So in a way, this is quite similar. But the difference is that that's an object that gets damaged, and that halacha allows for. But to injure ourselves as part of that mourning process wouldn't be permitted.
What are you supposed to do with that shirt?
No, dispose. Yeah. Halacha speaks about in the days of old when they needed to use it again. So they weren't able to use it. To try stitch. Yeah, they wanted to sew it up and reuse it. You can't do that. Yeah. Okay, so it says the Gemara, V'seret, Yochol, one to the right-hand column. Yochol afilu sorat abeso shenachal. What about if someone cuts themselves in anguish over the house that collapsed? Same idea. Frustration. Or his ship that drowned in the ocean or sank. Tamuloma lenefesh. The verse is very specific. It's speaking about the loss of a nefesh, the loss of a soul, the death of a loved one.
So you are permitted to.
Oh, well. The question is if you get punished or not. Permitted and then punished is two different things, but you're asking a good question. No. So let's see. So he says, Eino chayav, he's only liable to punishment, ela ala meis bilvad, only if he does it for the dead person, not for these other things. What I'm saying to Hilton is, it's one thing not to be liable, it's another thing to say, can you do it? Right? So there are some areas of halacha that you can't do it, but there's no punishment for it. Even lashes, perhaps, the word be. Let's see, number 32. Yeah, so 32 clarifies this point. This refers only to a biblical prohibition. There is a disagreement among the authorities, however, over whether the rabbis prohibited self-laceration over losses other than death. Some rule they did. In other words, it's prohibited. Others disagree, reasoning that the rabbis did not want to hold a person responsible for what he does in the times of grief. Interesting. In other words, how can you judge a person in a time of grieving? Let him do whatever he chooses to do. Lost his house, lost his ship. It's okay.
One of the things in Pekabot talks about judging someone when the dead is in front of them.
Yeah. So in this case, what the loss is in front of him.
Yeah.
It says also, don't judge a person until you're in his footsteps. So there's an emotional response to a loss. But nonetheless, let's just clarify this one. Nonetheless, for death of a loved one, you can't do it. And that's interesting because I wonder, this explains that why specifically this one? If the damaging is wrong, then why specifically death? Why not the house or the boat? Which I would say ties into the concept of the pagans. Because we're saying now that the boat and the house, we're not going to judge you. Whether or not it's prohibited, it's a debate, but for sure you're not getting punished for it. But yet, if you do it for your dead person, which is a worse loss than a house and a boat, should I bring them into the Zoom? Can I link apps? One day they're going to be able to link apps. You'll bring someone from Facebook into WhatsApp, into Zoom, and you'll have a community of different applications. Okay, so I would say it's got to do with the pagan. The pagans did it for their dead bodies. That's why we can't do it. It's just my understanding here. Okay. That's right. No, it was a specific ritual for their dead bodies. Now, whether or not people grieve by cutting themselves, that's irrelevant. That's whatever they can choose. But the pagan idol worshippers' ways were specifically to do it for the dead body. That's my understanding.
Maybe it's good to be a specific mourning ritual, a ritual for
death, and therefore we must follow that.
Yeah.
Maybe okay.
We don't have a sunken boats.
Right. Okay. So in other words, we've got Kriya and we've got Shiva, and that we should be observing rather than cutting ourselves.
This Kriya Dorasa the one.
Durban.
This is Dorasa.
Yes. Okay, true. He's saying so did the Torah have in mind the fact that we're going to have other ways of mourning? But Shiva is Doraisa. Okay. He's responding to you. Okay, Brian, what are you saying? All right, let's see. Now, what about 5 cuts over one dead person? That every cut would be liable for, or liable for Makkos, for lashes, every cut. V'nefesh, v'seret.
How many lashes per cut?
Up to, well, it could be 39. If you can handle 39, it'd be 39. Look at L'chayev Kol Sutta. It teaches you that you're obligated to give him punishment for every single cut. Look at 33. The Torah could have stated the prohibition succinctly by using the verb for make a cut. Lenefesh lo sisretu. You shall not make a cut for a departed soul. The unnecessarily wordy veseret lo veseret lenefesh lo sitno bivsarchem. So basically, it's a longer terminology. and a cut you shall not put. Yeah, a cut you shall not put. What do you mean putting? I mean, that's the question. And a cut you shall not put. That suggests a separate penalty for every cut. Alternatively, the Brisa refers to the superfluous vav in the seret and a cut. The case here presumably is dealing with one who makes 5 cuts simultaneously after receiving one warning. Why are we saying that? Because if it was separate, then you would have.
It's obvious.
There's obviously you'll have Makkos on each one because it's separate. But the fact that he was including all 5 cuts into one warning, you may think it's under one category, one punishment. The answer is no, you get Makkos for every case. Rabbi Yossi continues this thought and he says, well, we learn, remember this. Remember, he makes 1 cut for 5 dead people. Says that he has in mind 5 names. He's liable for every one. Now, this is interesting because what did he do wrong? He made 1 cut. But because he had his intention was 5 names of 5 dead people, then that's a problem. That's very unique. Tamalema lenefesh. He uses the word lenefesh. Unless he announced it. Yeah, so he had to know that what he was intending. He must have told someone. He never intended. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. If he didn't say it, then we wouldn't know. We're assuming that he makes a declaration, like an introduction. This act, behold, is in memory of this. And someone shouts out and says, "Hey, you can't do that." He says, I'm doing it anyway. And he cuts himself. I don't know. I guess that would be the only scenario. Otherwise we wouldn't know. Okay. So so the word lenefesh for every soul, for the soul, sounds unique. And he says, okay, the Gemara is going to discuss later why it's, if you look at 36, Gemara will presently ask why Rabbi Yossi considers this expression superfluous. Why is the word lenefesh? Okay. It teaches me that we are obligated to punish him for every soul that he had in mind for this single cut. The Gemara asks, how you see that? How do you see from the word lenefesh? Okay, he's got a good question here. How do you get from the word lenefesh that it's every soul that you had in mind? We've already used the word lenefesh for a previous learning. We've already remember the rule. You can only use a pasuk or a word for one limud, one particular learning. You can't apply it to multiple places for different halachas. So we've already used the word lenefesh. What do we use the word lenefesh for? To tell me that this is specifically a prohibition that's linked to death. If it's a house or a boat, it's not a prohibition. How do you know that? Because the verse said lenefesh. Because it's specified for a soul, for a dead body, that's why you know it's for a nefesh, not for a house and a boat. So therefore, the word lenefesh has already been pre-used, preoccupied. Well, hapikte lebeisoi, you've already used it for his house, shanofa that fell, lisvinasa, and for his boat, shetova bayam, which got drowned or sank in the sea. So actually, the word lenefesh is not superfluous, and therefore you can't use the word lenefesh to teach you about every single soul for whom you had this in mind. Okay, over the page. We're going now to 21A1. That was quite a 20. Okay, 21A1. We're about to get to a mission, actually. It looks like. Okay. So says the Gemara, Kesava Rabbi Yossi himself, who taught this. Yeah, Rabbi Yossi taught this. Holds that a srita cut and a gedida cut are the same, are one and the same prohibition. What's two types of cuts? A srita cut and a gedida cut. I understand what it is. Yeah. Okay. So let me explain what it is. There's two terminologies in Hebrew about cutting. One was the seret. That was the previous one. Srita, a cut. Seret, srita. That's one type. And there's another type. The other type is the shaving. The cutting. Look at footnote 2.
Incision and laceration.
Is that how you translate that too? Incision and laceration. What's the difference? What does incision mean? Or what does laceration mean? Oh, it's both cutting.
Yeah. The less election.
No, it's like a
Blunt impact.
It's a serious.
I think it's incision.
It's a lighter. It's a slight.
It's like a surgeon's.
Yes.
It's more the
Laceration is rough. Okay, interesting.
Tear, ripple, wound.
No. Yeah. Another one's cut. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Another one's
incision
cut.
sounds a lot
Is a
more-
cut versus a tear or a rip. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Yeah, diagnostic, perfect. Right. So look at number 2.
The both intentional.
It seems like. So look at number 2. He says lo siskoidu. That's the gedida. Gedida cut. Lo siskoidu. Don't make a cut. And then it says lo sasimu korcha bein einechin on the mace, and don't make yourself bald between your eyes. I would imagine here. It's the same. It's the same bein einecha that we have a Shema. So don't shave off a bald spot in memory of those who passed. Same idea. But that's the second. Let's focus on the first 2 words. Lois is go to do. Don't make yourselves a cut. So now we have a new verse. One verse said seret, which is an incision. The other word said tiskoi to do gedida, which is laceration, a much rougher type of cut. Okay. So Rabbi Yossi says, why do we have 2 verses? So he says it's actually it's the same prohibition. It's the same thing. And even though we have 2 different words, both words apply to the same prohibition. He brings here either by hand or by an instrument. That's interesting. Why is differentiating? Okay, we'll see soon why. See footnote 7. Okay, we'll see that. We'll see that soon. I think I got it. Ochsiv Hassam, and it says there, Lemais. It already says for a dead. It says in this body, in this verse, Lemais, for a dead body. So Rabbi Yossi says, I don't need the word lenefesh in that other verse, because it's the same prohibition. Seret lenefesh and loisis goidudu lemais is the same prohibition, and I already have this verse that deals with the dead body. So I don't need the word that says lenefesh. So if that's the case, what does the nefesh apply to? The nefesh will apply for what we're saying to teach us this extra new halacha that we have in mind every single soul. You'll transgress for every single person. That's interesting. So I don't know why we have 2 verses. Same mitzvah, hinted to, but there's 2 verses with different words.
Incision is done.
Saying so he's including both the incision and the laceration, and he's saying it's one prohibition, but whichever way you do it, you're going to be liable. Okay, that's a good point. So it's one mitzvah, but just hinted to by 2 different words. You either have the word incision or you have the word laceration. It falls on the same category. You can't injure in whatever way, right? But in the second verse, you have the word lemes, which tells you why you're doing it. I'm doing it for the dead body. I'm not doing it for the boat. I'm not doing it for the house. I'm doing it for the dead body. That's one thing. Then why does it say why does it say la nefesh in the other verse? They teach me every single soul.
I don't know if it's coming. It's a bit like what we had last week, or whatever the other week that we spoke about. Originally, we thought that you're not allowed to put the cut yourself, and we said no. It's the person
Someone
who's
else.
doing the action.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the way these words are said, and the cut for a departed you shall not put in your flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And this one actually says that does it say here? You shall not cut yourself. The first one sounds like you could let someone do it
For you. No, the first one's saying it's negating someone doing it for you.
Yeah. That if someone does it for
It's
you,
also a prohibition.
then no, the person that's doing it to you is
Liable. It's
is
liable.
liable.
And here it's talking
Versus
about
says to
you did it yourself. So that's
Do it
you're
yourself.
answering the other question. Why you need both?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's coming, or maybe
Okay. Sitnu ifsarchem. The cut for the departed soul you should not put. You really see a differentiation? Very close. Okay, I hear.
It's also, I suppose, like clear. You don't.
Someone else does it on you.
Yeah.
Someone else does it on you. Okay. Something to look into definitely is would there be a difference between these two verses and who's doing the action? All right. We're on page 21A1, second paragraph. Now, a separate thing. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Hamasaret Bekli, someone who does an infliction using an instrument. So in other words, he's not cutting himself. I guess he would cut it with himself means he would cut it with his nail, I would imagine. How do you cut yourself? But he's using a clear now. Using a sharp tool, and with the tool he's cutting. Look at 6. It is clear that the word gedida chiefly connotes cutting with an instrument, while the word srita chiefly connotes cutting with one's hand. That's also why you need it. Why you need both. That's by stating the case of one who afflicts a srita cut with an instrument. That's the original one. Shmuel is teaching a srita cut with an instrument. The difference. Shmuel is teaching that the term srita can apply also to an instrument-inflicted wound. According to one who cuts himself with an instrument violates 2 biblical prohibitions. Interesting. Okay.
Is it not? It's like something designed for cutting versus you pick up a stone or something.
That'll be the other one. That's gedida. The second one. With the fifth.
First one you said it was a rough object.
No, other way around. Srita is the clean one,
Okay.
and gedida, the second one, is going to be the rough. So I understand. Now, if you use a clean, okay, let's go on. Mate, yeah? Okay, there?
Yeah.
Mate, today we asked a question. Srita or gedida achasi? Okay, so how did you say that they're both the same, srita and gedida? It's not the same. Ela srita biyad or gedida b'kli. In other words, okay, we're challenging Shmuel. Shmuel is an Amora, which means he's a Gemora sage. He uses the word hamasaret, one who cuts himself. Incision, perfect cut. Hamasaret bekli. If he does srita with a vessel, using a knife of sorts. That's who? Shmuel. That's Shmuel, yeah? Now the Gemara says you're wrong with your terminology. You can't associate srita to a kli. We have a principle based on the brayso we just quoted. As srita is with your hand, and gedida, which is more rough, is using a vessel. So your terminology is wrong, Shmuel. How could you say in your rule. Hamasaret bekli. It's like saying you're riding your car instead of driving a car. Yeah, you got to use the specific terminology or verb for what you're doing. You can't say hamasaret bekli. You got to say ha megaded bekli. Gedida is with the vessel. No, which action? Your action of driving is not riding. You'll get to the destination, sure. But if you're speaking proper English, you'll have to say, I'm driving the car, not riding the car. So over here, Mesaret, if Mesaret is what we agree on, if Mesaret means a smoother type of incision and then indicates your hand, then how could you say Mesaret Bakli? You're using a vessel. The terminology is not right. Based on and we can do that because the Brisa we said is a Mishnaic sage. Mishnah. Right? Tana. And Shmuel is an Amoraic sage, is a Gemora. So you can take a Tana and say, look at the terminology of our teachers of the Tanoim of the previous generation. Your terminology doesn't fit in with theirs. So the Gemara answers, interesting answer. Who to Amar Rav Yossi? He ruled according to Rav Yossi that we just discussed earlier. If Rav Yossi holds that the two prohibitions are the same, because it's all the same halacha, then actually there's no difference between mesaret and gedida, and incision and laceration, and a vessel and your nail and your hand. It's all one a big prohibition, and also the act doesn't change. The tool won't change the act. That's what we're saying. It's one of no, but I'm saying one of the same. I'm even saying that he won't even differentiate between a clear cut and a rough cut. He'll say it's irrelevant what type of cut it is. It's all the same. Not so simple. Why do you use this terminology here and this terminology there? I don't know why. But he just says it's all part of one big picture. And because it'll be interesting, by the way, to see this. How would you know the halacha? We'll see now in the Gemara. In this, how would you? We've got a debate here. Do we say that it's one part of one prohibition, whether it's srita, whether it's gedida, whether it's a kli, whether it's a hand? Do we say it's one prohibition, or do we say that it's two separate prohibitions? One is called srita, v'seret lositnu b'psarchem, and that applies to the hand, and one is called gedida, which is this one over here that applies with the tool, and it's. So what would you do if you really look up the subject? You'd look up the Rambam's list of halachot, and you would see how many he lists for this particular prohibition. If he lists them all as one in his definition of a mitzvah, then you know that he agrees with Rabbi Yossi. If he separates the two of them and he says there's mitzvah one called don't do srita, and mitzvah number 2 is called don't do gedida, then you know that he agrees with the first opinion of Tanakama. So we can actually see if you bring it.
It's so that it's both a violation of borders. I'm just trying to clarify.
No, but
Because someone's going to mourn with death, now they're going to cut themselves with a sharp instrument.
or
Take,
his own hand.
yeah.
Either.
For a piece of wood or whatever.
Okay,
Regardless of what's done.
he's going to be liable, but the nafka mina, the practical issue is going to be, first of all, academically, is it one mitzvah or two mitzvahs? Because prohibition. Yeah, because you got 613 commandments. So are you including these as two, or are you including this as one? That's a academic debate, right?
It's not defined as a mitzvah.
Avera, yeah, but it's still part of the 613 commandments. That's number one. Number two is there would be scenarios that you could end up having two punishments. He gave me a scenario like that here. In other words, if I can give you a scenario where you're doing both at the same time, are we going to give you lashes twice, or give you lashes once? There's also a practical outcome. He does bring an example here. No, you have to. Yeah. Warning the mitzvah correctly. In other words. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And then he does it
Yeah.
twice.
No, I would say you warn him with the terminology about the hand, and he does it with a vessel. Yeah, you haven't given him the correct terminology of warning.
You have the same equal weight of flashes.
Yeah. That won't differ. Yeah.
Might as well do it properly.
That won't differ. No, I think it's a practical thing. If you warn him with the terminology, because if you agree it's all part of one big prohibition, then use this terminology, use that terminology, it doesn't make a difference. If you believe that it's two separate mitzvahs, then if you use the wrong terminology for the wrong act, maybe you're not going to get lashes as a result.
So make an assumption here. Your hand. Vegetable. Not necessarily.
Okay, so I will say that that's the way Mark's translation translated it. You'll see that the art scroll has not done that. The art scroll chose not to give a definition of insuration. No, it's Safaria. It's Safaria. The art scroll chose not to translate it because
Translated.
no, you said
He said this is what an incision is.
no, you said incision and laceration.
Yes.
No, no. I know. Okay, fine. You use the English translation there. No, I'm saying that. I'm saying that the art scroll. I'm saying. I'm saying is that the art scroll chose not to tell us what the difference between a srita cut and a gedida cut is. What? Yeah, clinically, yeah. Because we don't know the difference. All we know is, did he use his hand or did he use the vessel? We don't know if it was clean or not clean or rough or not rough. So the art scroll chose to call it seret cut and gedida cut.
And what is gedida?
No, so we know with a vessel. Yeah, as it seems like.
Yeah, check it.
No, you don't know. Because Lewis is saying you can have a smooth cut with a hand, you can have a jagged cut, vice versa. You can switch them around either way. I think what I understand is machloket is that if you believe it's all part of one mitzvah, you may still agree on the definition. That seret means hand and gedida means clean, right? But it doesn't make a difference because it's all part of one prohibition.
So I just looked it up on this particular search the mitzvot per parsha.
Ah, okay.
And so the first one, it actually says that it's to do with tattoos. And the second one,
Seret is tattoos
yes,
and not cuts.
that's what it says.
Oh, wow.
Because it mentions instrument.
They list, they give a number of Rambam mitzvah number 72. That means something.
Yeah, no, that does mean something. Because
And then the other one, it says, what is it?
14.1.
14.1 was Deuteronomy 14.1. 72 and 73 are the two mitzvot, are the two numbers I gave. This is off this, whichever website says.
Wow.
Right.
So he's saying seret means tattoo. Don't we have another word for tattoo? Let's go back here for a second.
So send you this link.
No.
That's why I understood it initially.
You're saying it's a tattoo. To the tattoo discussion.
Around the hand and the instrument and things like that.
Okay.
There we go.
I want to see something else. I want to see if we can find the Rambam's letter that says over here. Do you know what I mean? In the Gemara, you can find the letter. 1 second.
What happens in the
Okay, let's go on. Maybe, as Craig said, we're still discussing this topic. Let's go on. A related teaching, bottom left-hand corner. Tana Kame de Rabbi Yochanan. A teacher once taught, or a student, or a teacher once taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Al Mace, a person cut himself over a dead person. Bein biyad, bein bekli chayav. Whether he did it with his hand or he did it with an instrument, he is liable. Okay. Al avodas kochavim. But if he cuts himself in idolatrous worship, that means you worship the idols by cutting oneself. Biyad chayav. If you use your hand, then you are liable. Why? Because you serve the avodah zarah with your own body. The kli, if you use an instrument, you're exempt from that, because using an instrument is not idolatrous, because you're not using something. Because because that's they didn't do it that way.
you take yourself as part of the art of the worship.
Yeah.
So what if we do with the
Vessel.
vessel, so it's not a
Yeah. So that's not the way it was done. You had to do it yourself. Yeah. It's an extension of the hand. The Gemora discusses that with regards to with a spear in front of you. So the Gemara discusses and which part of you where you're standing. The Gemara discusses that with regards to murder. If you're holding a spear in your hand and you murder someone, or even a gun, that's your keli, that's your kli. Is that considered you? So Mark saying, well, why isn't it idol worship? It's an extension of you serving the idol by cutting yourself. So look at footnote 14. If a person vows, slaughters a sacrifice, burns an offering, or pours libations to an idol, he's liable to the death penalty, whether or not that particular idol is normally worshipped in that manner. But the fact that you did it to the idol is a problem. If he performs some other genuine act of worship to an idol, he's liable to the death penalty only if that particular idol is customarily worshipped in that manner. Otherwise, he incurs only Makkos, because it says, and do not worship them. Do you understand? So there's certain prohibitions that you can't do to any idol. And those are prohibitions that are linked to the service of God. Slaughtering a sacrifice, bowing down, burning an offering, pouring libations. Those are services that we do to Hashem. If you do them to another idol, you are liable to the death penalty. Now, what about if it's another type of worship? Well, that depends on whether that's the way you serve that idol or not. If it's the way you serve that idol, you'll get death penalty. If it's not, you'll get lashes as a side. Right. Now, if one serves an idol in a way that cannot at all be classified as an act of worship, he is exempt from punishment. That's in the present case. If this particular idol is customarily worshipped by cutting oneself by hand, the worshipper is liable to the death penalty. If it is not normally worshipped in that way, he is liable only to Makkos. Okay, so now says the Gemara about Ibchoksiv, middle paragraph on the left-hand side. The opposite is written in the Torah. What does it say in the Torah? Regarding the Baal, where Elisha confronted the worshippers and the priests of the Baal. And Elisha met them on Har HaKarmel. And we read this in the Haftorah. He challenged them to see whose sacrifice will be consumed. That's what we see, Hashem Ulakim, Hashem Ulakim. He announces that's where we get the pasuk from. Okay, so it says there, Vayisgodedu k'mishpatom b'charavos u'baramachim. And they cut themselves with swords and spears according to their custom. This verse expressly states that the cutting with an instrument is an established idolatrous practice. But it says that they cut themselves with vessels. Why then do we say that if you do it for idol purposes with a knife, you're not going to be liable.
That's not good in serving the Baal. So that was
A service for the bar.
that good, so that could.
And not what? Other types of idols. You could answer that actually. You could say that was unique to the Baal, but it's not generally the case for all others. Hmm. Okay, let's do the answer. I think the answer is going to say more simpler. Don't differentiate between the different types of idols. Rather state biyad patur. We just switched it around. If he cuts himself by hand for an idolatrous purpose, he's exempt because that's not how they do it. They don't cut themselves by hand. And b'chli chayav. But if you cut yourself with an instrument, that is the way you'll serve an idol worship, with an instrument, and for that you'll be liable. Just switch it around. Look at to answer, Evan, your point, number 16. These are general rules, and I think the Gemara chose to go the general route, to be honest. However, if it is known that one particular idol is worshipped by cutting with one's hand, so if you know a specific case, the person is liable for doing so. That goes to your point. If Baal has something unique to it, and yes, you can't do it. But I think the Gemara just went the easy route. So all idol worship is the same. If it's by hand, by hand. If it's not, if it's by kli, by the vessel, it's by the vessel.
Exactly what I did.
Yeah.
Yes, we don't suppose.
Of that particular idol, of that idol.
Yeah.
So can you imagine how well versed the Beis Din needed to be in paganism? You had to study the laws of idol worship or the details of idol worship to be able to give a psak and to answer. Good point. I mentioned at Shalosh Shudas a few weeks ago, is that to study other religions we've been discouraged by Chachamim over the years, sages of the years, and rabbis in contemporary times too, have discouraged people about learning other religions. And the Rebbe spoke to a few people about not reading Christian books. And the belief was that it would contaminate our minds and hearts and could lead someone to maybe not following the entire religion, but certain principles and certain behaviors and certain standards. It could have an influence on people.
But if you don't know anything about other religions, the big sins. Do it
No, but we're talking about that you did it as a sign of idol worship.
No.
Then why no?
Sins.
For idol worship?
Not for others.
Then what? No, why are you doing this? You mean cutting yourself a dead body? No. No, so this particular case is talking about when he did it for the sake of idol worship.
But you don't.
I think we've got other cases.
If you remember again, he looks at the wall. So again, that's the process.
Yeah, sure.
To do this.
Sure.
It's not just by the bus.
So let's get back to the guy who's doing it for the idol, because this is Lewis's point. Studying religions. Okay. Beis Din would have to know the religions.
So with that,
They would have to study, exactly. Because how else are you going to judge the person? In terms of what type of service they did or didn't do? You have to go research, to go learn.
that is really a good balance there.
Yeah.
Study.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. So that is the counter argument to that to the first discussion, is to know your the benefits of your religion more by comparing it to other religions, right? And also how to argue, because you may end up in a debate, missionaries and others. You may need to debate your religion.
That was what you.
That was the discussion.
It's a heretic.
So right. The Mishnah says you need to know what to say to a heretic. So it's interesting, but I think the general. I once saw this because the book was written. This was quite I can share with you, it was quite a contentious issue. He was our visitor and guest rabbi a few years back, Shmuley Boteach, and he wrote a book called Kosher Jesus. He also wrote a book called Kosher Sex. That's another whole discussion, and that was generally Sorry, I don't have the book. No, that that was generally written on kosher and proper principles. Yeah, he spoke about it. His point is that anyway, increasing lust and increasing passion for one's spouse, and if you put in place taharat mishpacha and family purity and abstaining, then the passion and excitement is more real. That's basically his theme. But kosher Jesus has an interesting connotation to that. First of all, was Jesus so kosher? That's a whole debate in its own right. The Rambam says not. The Rambam says clearly that Yeshu led people astray. Others want to say that it wasn't him; it was disciples of his who interpreted certain things into a religion, but he didn't found Christianity. There's a debate among the commentaries. The Rambam says that Yeshu definitely took people astray. Whether his intention was to establish a religion or not, that's irrelevant. The reality is that the Rambam defines him as someone. So that was one debate. And the second debate was, is it now healthy to read about Jesus and the background to Christianity and how a Yiddish boy could end up being the founder of a new religion? And I saw quite a few piskei dinim, halachas, written by contemporary rabbonim who were saying that we can't take the risk today of engaging in religious books and other literature because of the risks they can have. So the question, to answer Lewis's question, the question is going to be, who is strong enough morally and ethically and academically to be able to read through the content of other religions and remain faithful and strong to one's own principles? That's the question. We used to have a few people. If you remember, we used to have, just to give you an example, we used to have an individual in shul, without names being mentioned. He hasn't been back since COVID. He hasn't been around for a while. Who used to have constant questions on Christianity and Judaism. I don't think he was that. I don't think he used to come to Rabbi Goldman and I every kiddush, every kiddush, every bracha, every shir, and this topic was killing him, and he knew he was conflicted, like he knew it. But every time he would come and say, "But what does Christianity say about it? And what does Judaism say about it? And what's the comparison?" And he told me, he says, "I've read so much about Christian belief that all I think about all day long is what does Christianity say about it? What does Judaism say about it? How do you interpret the verse? Is the verse really the Torah way, or is the verse interpreted the Christian way?" Oh, so I said, if you spend more, so he came to Shurim, and he came to Shurim. I said, keep on reading the Jewish books, because he would go home to his home. He was like a bit of an introvert in a way. He would go home by himself and read constant Christian books. He had this obsession with Christianity, but then he would come to shul and say, "But no, I'm a proud Jew. I'm just conflicted." You got to be careful. Okay, that's really taking things to an extreme. Yeah, that's right. The moment you start going that route, you're going to become more curious and try to understand more and research more. Sometimes we're protecting the community, and we want ignorance. We want ignorance. Yeah, sometimes that's what Chachamim are saying. We prefer you to be ignorant because we know the danger of what academia could do to you. That's the idea. Where are we up to here? Okay. Very, 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 very. He was asking me questions that I never ever explored. And he was saying to me, "Rabbi, you need to know this so that you can argue the topics with me." And I'm like, first of all, I don't know if I want to argue the topics with you. And second of all, I'm not sure if I'm cut out for this. I said, there are certain rabbanim, because he said to me, you should know the topics so that you can discuss and debate. Oh, he used to try and dodge him and duck him. You So that was, I mean, yeah, you got to know. I actually said to him, I said that there are rabbanim who are cut out for this, who have studied the material, He said, no, I can't find them. I said, you got to go online. So he did. He used to go and watch Rabbi Sachs as a debate against someone. Who?
Richard
Yeah.
Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins, yeah. So Rabbi Sachs has a debate against Richard Dawkins. There's other Rabbanim, Rabbi Emmanuel Shochat was in Toronto. He has a debate. He says, I've watched them all. He's done all. Anyway, that's obviously his personal. Everyone's got their own challenge. That's his challenge. Yeah. Very thorough. No, very.
I want to walk out the guy and it's slight engagements into this.
He was asking you these questions.
Getting out of this,
He walked on.
we saw together for bits. We saw